Hello, everybody. JJ Cooper here with Ben Badler and Geoff Pontes, and we're here on the Hot Sheet Show, and we are excited to join you. The off season is already rolling. We've already had a signing already with Josh Naylor agreeing to terms with the Mariners, Ryan Yarbrough with the Yankees, but that's not what we're here about. But if you wonder about that kind of stuff, you wonder what your farm system's looking like, you need to go check out at baseballamerica.com. We've already posted 11 top 10 prospect list. Dodgers went up today. We are already on the NL West. How time flies. Full scouting reports on the top 10 prospect with grades, with the BA grades and our risk factors and our adjusted grades, so you can see how different farm systems compare. All of that over at baseballamerica.com. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, we'll go to our first move. I love this story. So Ben Badler, as you see right here, wrote up last week a piece at baseballamerica.com we want to talk about today. Ben, I just kind of want to set the stage for you. I'll ask it this way. How did you discover this, and kind of take us through what you discovered about the secret little trick that the Brewers have been doing in the draft that's been paying off for them?
Yeah, so I write up our Brewers top 30 prospects list for us for the prospect handbook, and noticed it. Noticed it over the last few drafts, but and then again they did it this year, and just seeing the trends at the top of what is a really good farm system, which is something they do differently than every other team. So ever since MLB shrunk the draft down to 20 rounds 5 years ago, every team except for the Brewers takes pretty much the same approach to rounds 11 and on. And that's just to draft college player after college player after college player. Any bonus above $150,000 after the 11th round counts against your bonus pool. So you will get a team, say the Angels have done this quite a few times, who they'll keep some money in their bonus pool after the 10th round and throw a big, $1 million plus bonus at a high school player like a Trey Gregory Alford or a Caden Dana. But for the most part, teams are basically just kind of going on autopilot and just taking college players from the 11th round on, because those are the guys that you're going to be able to sign those players for $150,000 or less. And the Brewers just take a totally different approach to their 11 to 20 round picks. They're the only team in baseball that's drafted as many, I think 35 high school players. Nobody's drafted that many players since 2021. The Rangers are really the only other team that's drafted half as many high school players as them in those rounds. They've also signed more high school players from the 11th round on, and obviously signing players is what actually matters. And there's only 3 teams in baseball that have even signed half as many high school players as the Brewers have from the 11th round on. And specifically, it really hasn't just been, taking these huge overslot high school players or the most famous names. They've been signing a lot of undervalued high school players, guys who are under-scouted, under-committed players, and they've done a really great job of getting the signability right and evaluating those players properly too.
That's what kind of really stands out here is that, like you said, you can draft high school players all you want. If you don't sign them, it doesn't matter. This is kind of a scouting and analysis and kind of synthesis working on here. Take us through, though, like, okay, so they've signed some high school players. Now lay out for us kind of the advantage that they've found from this. Who are some of the players that they've managed to kind of find that maybe everyone else thought was just headed off to college?
Yeah, you look at the results, and the Brewers have one of the best farm systems in baseball. So it's a tough top 10 prospects list to crack. And 2 of their top 10 prospects, and you can certainly argue for a third in there as well, came through this approach. Bishop Letson, who is their number 2 pitching prospect, was an 11th round pick out of an Indiana high school who was committed to Purdue, signed for a little under $500,000. Josh Adamchevsky, who just had a great Arizona Fall League, second baseman / outfielder, one of the better pure hitters in their organization, another Indiana high schooler committed to Ball State, 15th round pick in that same 2023 draft. Luke Adams, much more polarizing prospect, but a corner infielder, a lot of patience, power, could easily be inside their top 10 if you wanted to make an argument for him. 12th rounder out of an Illinois high school, committed to Michigan State. Him and Adam Chevsky both signed for under $300,000. So, there's other guys too, right? Like pitchers like Jaden Dubanowitz, Tyler Renz. They didn't technically draft Ethan Dorches in this 11 to 20 round range. He was a 10th round pick, but kind of that same model of player, that same philosophy of, under-scouted, under-committed high school player. He was an Illinois Chicago commit, 10th round pick who signed for underslot in the 10th round. And while other teams are kind of just plowing through college pick after college pick, knowing that a lot of these guys that they're taking, these college players, are going to be long shots to get to the big leagues or have any significant impact or significant major league value beyond the edge of a major league roster, the Brewers have been adding a lot of really quality prospects to their system who have the potential to be everyday players or in Letson's case, a mid-rotation starter potentially.
So, and you kind of detail this in the story, but is this something I know? I love the Brewers fans' reaction to gave you the great story, and I wish that you had never written this story at the same time because they, if you're a Brewers fan, you kind of like that they've got this advantage. Is this something that's really replicable? Is this something, obviously, if everyone who's been zigging zagged, then all of a sudden this would no longer be an advantage. But are there maybe some inbuilt things here that would keep, more teams from trying to do this, or is this something that could be capitalized on by other teams, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you're one of the few fishermen at the pond, and all of a sudden a whole bunch of other fishermen come in, then yeah, it creates some more competition. But I do think, yeah, it's a set of blueprints that other teams can try to emulate, and it's not like the Brewers have a monopoly on these types of players. I mean, Zaire Hope was now a Dodgers prospect, in our top 100 prospects. Cubs drafted him as a North Carolina recruit, committed his senior year of high school, not a super high bonus guy. Orioles did it with Nate George, pretty under the radar late round high school signing, not a big college commitment when he signed, another guy who's a top 100 prospect. So I think other teams can try to implement the same approach. At the same time, it does take a lot of skill, which the Brewers have done, which is you have to evaluate the players properly, and B, you have to get the signability right. So, okay, sure, everybody would have loved to sign, Jack Bauer last year or Rock Chalowski out of high school too. If you're spending you can't just draft these guys in the later rounds. You have to know which guys who you do like. You spend the time on the spring because you do have a finite amount of time as a scout, especially as an area scout, to see all these players that you want to in the spring. And then to know, hey, yeah, this guy actually we should spend more time on, or we should draft because this guy's going to be willing to sign for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, not $2 million that we have no chance of signing.
Again, it's a fascinating story. By the way, if you have any questions about this, we love to answer your questions. So just put them in the chat on YouTube and we will try to answer them. But Geoff, when you saw this, when you look at this, what else jumps out to you from a standpoint of has been kind of laid out? They're kind of different types of players. They're all high school players, but this isn't something, that I think the Brewers have also been really good about kind of identifying, especially junior college pitchers. We've seen that it's not just Jacob Mizorowski, it's Aaron Ashby as well, a number of guys like that. But what else jumped out to you as far as kind of those hidden advantages that a team can carve out?
Yeah, and I think, we're in a day and age where I think a lot of people sort of feel, probably incorrectly, that there's no sort of hidden gems. There's no sort of under scouted, under analyzed area of any baseball space, particularly, domestic amateur prospects. But I think there still are. And I think, in the age of NIL, where there's certain high-end guys or sort of that mid-tier where those guys are going to sign. Knowing guys, as Ben kind of used the term, undercommitted, maybe committed to a school that is sort of below what their ability is. And sometimes those guys can maybe pop a little bit in the spring. And this is the value of still going out to games, collecting information on some prospects and then, knowing who to bring in for workouts, et cetera, so they can get further information and kind of plug that into a model, which I'm sure the Brewers are doing. So I think it's sort of interesting that you still sort of need those boots in the ground to sometimes identify these guys to then get those data points that teams are utilizing. And I think the Brewers just overall have done a really good job of that. And I already know that there are a few teams that are trying to emulate it, just like even just within their division. The Pirates signed a couple of guys after round 15 that were high school players this year for like $200,000, $300,000 bonuses. So I think it is something that we're going to see more of. But the biggest thing that jumps out to me is just, the actual work of going out there, finding these guys, identifying these guys, and realizing that there are still some opportunities to, I guess, buy low in a marketplace that feels like it's been, so oversaturated for so long.
Again, it's a fascinating story. Check it out over at baseballamerica.com. And speaking of prospects, we are getting ready to dive in a little bit on a Dodgers organization, Dodgers system that is loaded with outfielders. And we'll do that after this quick break.
Holiday shopping season is here, and we have you covered from head to toe.
Let's talk about an area that's not quite close to the toes. Let's get crazy with this holiday season. Yeah, that's MeUndies I'm spinning around, but the holiday season, now you can get MeUndies with some holiday prints on them.
That's right, ridiculously soft fabric holiday prints, matching holiday prints with your special person, or you can coordinate PJs for the family photo. And right now you can get up to 50% off with the code FOUL. We rock MeUndies. You should too. We're talking over 30 million pairs sold. Knock out all your holiday gifting needs today with MeUndies to get exclusive holiday deals up to, yep, I said it, 50% off. Go to MeUndies.com/foul and enter promo code FOUL. That's MEUNDIES.com/FOUL. Promo code FOUL for up to 50% off.
We are coming up on a special time. Now, if you are me, if you followed Jeff, probably know that Rule 5 fever is right around the corner. The Rule 5 draft will happen in December, but probably as importantly, tomorrow is the 40-man roster protection deadline. That is the day where teams have to set their rosters so that anyone who would have been Rule 5 eligible is added to the 40. And if they're not, then they're available. Players who have had 4 years, if you were a 19-year-old or older when you signed, effectively 5 years if you were an 18-year-old or younger when you signed. But Jeff, as we kind of get ready for this, what should fans expect? What should they look for tomorrow on 40-man roster protection day?
Yeah, I think there's going to be some obvious names, among top prospects who are eligible for the first time, who will get added onto their team's 40-man rosters. I think the more important stuff is maybe some of the more under-discussed names, a lot of relievers, pitchers, sometimes position guys that you don't expect to get protected that do. I always think that's important, especially if they're upper minors guys, because they could be in the team's plans at some point next season, and they're probably names that are worthwhile to know. But I think most exciting part of it is, the potential of the Rule 5 draft, which doesn't maybe necessarily bear, big results and big fruit, but year after year, there are a few players that make impacts with another major league team that are more or less forgotten about by their, parent club at this point in time, the team that, most of the time drafted them or traded for them. That deadline will happen tomorrow. We'll learn who will be available for the Rule 5 draft, which, as JJ discussed, is one of JJ and myself's favorite times of the year. I really think that, it's a period in time where it's interesting because, certain organizations can be deeper in certain positional groups, maybe don't have the ability to protect certain players that do end up exposed to the Rule 5 draft that could be of value to other teams. Shane Smith with the White Sox last year is a perfect example. And there's been many others throughout the history of the Rule 5 draft.
Yeah, I'll just point out, it was a really good Rule 5 draft last year. We had Shane Smith, we had Liam Hicks, number of players who stuck around, but not stuck, but actually the White Sox also, Mike Vassell was a very good reliever for them. The White Sox did last year what you would expect a team to do. Bad teams should use the Rule 5 draft to add talent from teams that have more talent in the minor league system. The idea is that if you have an overabundance of talent, you can't protect them all. But I would say more importantly, I would say what tomorrow is, which is something that Major League Baseball teams like to avoid, which is a decision point. It's a point where teams, they can say all they want about, oh, we love this prospect, or we, think this guy's great or whatever. Tomorrow is the day where that first round pick from a few years ago who really hasn't panned out, you either add him to the 40 or not. And if you don't, that's kind of saying that it probably hasn't gone, the draft pick has not gone the way you want. It's where you have to make that decision. Is that younger but more talented player, toolsier player? Are you going to leave that risk to see that they might get picked in the Rule 5 draft? Something like a Devison De Los Santos saw a couple years ago, and they might get offered back because you have to stay on that 40-man roster, the major league roster for the whole next year. Or do you kind of, as Jeff said, I think what we're seeing now is a lot more. That's kind of one more thing I want to ask you about this, Jeff. I feel like now with the ways that pitchers are developed, I think that teams are going to be looking more for kind of those standout traits, maybe even if the results haven't been there yet. I think you mentioned, what the White Sox did last year. Smith's best pitch was a changeup that he learned after he was drafted in the Rule 5 draft. But what do you think that are kind of some of the characteristics that we should look for that teams are going to protect? Maybe because of that, we're going to see some names protected tomorrow that maybe, fans wouldn't be as expecting to see.
Yeah, I think, the biggest one, the lowest hanging fruit is extension. And obviously that's not available to everybody publicly across all leagues. But I do think that that's, typically a sign of, a pitcher that's in the upper minors that has had some success, that is able to hit the broadside of a barn with a baseball, which there's a lot of guys in the Rule 5 with great stuff that have troubling walk rates. Those guys typically don't get picked. And if they do, more often than not, they're returned to their respective teams. So I think extension is probably the biggest one. I think you can look at some, sort of movement outliers, whether it's a guy who has a really, high ride IVB fastball that's unique. A lot of velocity as well, of course, can work if you have guys that are sitting, in the upper 90s to 100 miles an hour out of the bullpen. They throw strikes. More often than not, those guys are protected, so you're not going to see many of those, but that could be something to look for. And I think like an outstanding breaking ball or really outlier spin traits, when guys have, a greater feel for the ability to just naturally create raw spin rates on the baseball, more often than not, those kind of guys have more pathways to add a variety of different pitch types that teams typically look for and say, okay, we can add a cutter here, or, give this guy a different type of a slider to work off of this, et cetera, and kind of make the arsenal a little bit more full. So I think that's the biggest thing to look for. On the position side, it's hard to say, because there's just so few players who are taken in the Rule 5 draft that are impact hitters first. More often than not, they're good, defensive catchers, or, good defensive infielders like a Nasim Nunez, who was taken a few years ago. Those kind of guys tend to be more the flavor of position players that get taken. I think when we're looking at pitchers, though, it's pretty easy. Look at extension, look at some of those spin traits, look at the ability to throw strikes, but also throw the baseball just hard.
I think like you hit on this, like we've seen guys like Garrett Whitlock and all, like it's easier to make an impact, especially as a reliever than it is in the Rule 5. But the other thing that does stand out kind of along the lines of what you talked about, you hear every year about, oh, they're going to take this guy, then they're going to stick him on the bench, and then they'll develop in the future. We've studied this over the last 20 years. The players who make an impact almost always make an impact in their first year. Do not look at it. Like you can have a guy like Akil Baddoo who actually was useful in his rookie year with the Tigers, and then that was kind of it. If you get production out of a player on major league minimum in their Rule 5 draft year, that's really useful. If you are talking about it and thinking that you're going to develop someone into a player down the road, Anthony Santander, there are examples of that, but it's a lot harder to do. The other thing I think that you have to look for is injuries. Often are something that really kind of, if you have an injury, it actually helps you get picked in the Rule 5 draft, because the rule is you can't be optioned to the minors, but you only have to be on the active roster for half of the season. So if you're on the injured list and then you can have a rehab stint, it is something that does kind of allow you a little bit more time, a little less time on that 26-man active roster. That's probably, we've got the Rule 5 fever, but we know that a lot of you also have prospect fever. So we'll be right back after another quick break, and we are going to talk about that pretty impressive Dodgers top 10.
Nobody covers the prospect world and the draft world like Baseball America, and you get a little taste at baseballamerica.com. But if you would like the full menu, then get yourself a subscription to Baseball America at baseballamerica.com.
We are heading into the final sprint, and we are doing so with a system that has been kind of consistently near the top of our organization talent rankings. Ben, when I look at this Dodgers top 10 this year, still very good, but is it tailing off maybe a little bit from what we saw a few years ago?
Maybe a little bit, but what stands out to me is that this is a team that when you're consistently among or having the best record in baseball, and you're having your draft pick get moved down every year because of how much you spend, and you're starting from one of the lower end international bonus pools every year, like you should have a bottom 10, if not bottom 5 farm system in baseball. And the Dodgers still have 4 guys who are top 100 prospects right now. And there's depth beyond them too. Like, I don't think it's, one of the top 2 or 3 farm systems in baseball, but for a team that, based on where they pick in the draft, the disadvantages they have internationally, like, nobody's crying for the Dodgers. They have a ton of other advantages everywhere else, but they've signed their international signings continue to be really strong. You can see that in their top 2 signings, or excuse me, their top 2 prospects, Eduardo Quintero and Josue DePaula, both international signings. Mike Sirota and Zaire Hope are guys they traded for, who were in, I don't know, the lower levels, or I think in Sirota's case, I don't know if he'd even played yet before the Dodgers acquired him. So two guys who I don't know if you call them undervalued at the time. I'm sure both teams, the Reds and the Cubs, wish they could have those guys back, but they just find a way to keep acquiring talent for an organization that should really be one of the lower end FAR systems in baseball. But I definitely would not consider them in that grouping.
Jeff, Ben kind of pointed this out, but like the thing that Sirota and Hope kind of illustrate here is, I do think the Dodgers have a little bit of a advantage, maybe a little strong, because they have other advantages. But I think that they take a kind of a long-term approach where they're happy. Look, Michael Busch was blocked for them, so they trade him and they bring back young talent in return. Sirota is kind of another example like that, as Ben said. This is a guy who could have been a first-round pick, had injuries in his draft year, and then they think he's undervalued, so they go snap him up. But the key part of this is, if you're willing to trade big leaguers for guys who are 3, 4, 5 years away, that's where you can kind of make some of these big swings, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's also the advantage of being able to go out into free agency, spend some money, so you don't necessarily have to rely on guys like Michael Busch as an everyday major leaguer. They can then trade those guys away, as you said, clear out 40-man spots, take chances on higher upside, lower level players. I think they also have the advantage of having a lot of resources within player development, having a great track record and a great reputation, I think, amongst representation and agencies with players in the amateur draft. So if you're sort of presented with maybe taking a little bit less money to go and sign with the Dodgers versus sign with another team around earlier for a little bit more money, you might take the less money because it might be better for your career and your own, personal player development. So I think there's stories like that throughout this system. They make really good trades, as Ben mentioned at the top. They sign well in the international market and they develop those players well. And there's a lot of pitching depth throughout this system that isn't even included within this top 10. It's a really interesting system. And I think the other thing with the Dodgers is every year there's a few players that, maybe don't even rank with inside the top 30 that then sort of pop up and present themselves as potential top 30 type of prospects. It's just being able to hit on all the different areas and all the different acquisition windows, whether it's the international market, whether it's free agency, whether it's the domestic draft, or even signing non-drafted free agents that are interesting. The Dodgers just find a way to sort of hit on all those. And of course, we know about their ability to get back the most in trades.
I will say that the thing that looking at the system right now, it is very outfielder heavy at the top, as we just kind of mentioned. This is a team that has 4 outfielders at the top and 4 top 100 prospect outfielders at the top of the system. Pitching wise, a little thinner than it's been. But at the same time, again, as Ben kind of noted, this is a team that has both traded and also pushed to the majors a number of pitchers who did make impacts for them this year. Some of those kind of a little bit lesser names in some cases. But I would say that with all of this, you could say that the Dodgers kind of, yes, they have the all of the above approach. And that kind of does mean it's really hard to crack the Dodgers lineup or the Dodgers rotation as a prospect. But that doesn't mean that you don't have value, because again, they often end up trading some of those players as well. We are wrapping up here on another Baseball America hot sheet, but we do want to remind you to like and subscribe. We want you to know that every time we're coming out, we're here every Monday. And I would say also with this, check out baseballamerica.com. If you enjoyed this, there's so many scouting reports, so much 40-man roster analysis that we'll be doing tomorrow, so much that we'll be doing. We've got college fall ball updates. There's so much over at baseballamerica.com. Check it all out, and check out the YouTube channel. We've got a lot more there as well. For Ben and Jeff, thank you for joining us here on the Hot Sheet Show.